On this week's special edition of the Pick Six, Joe Barry's defense, it is complete garbage. We knew that, and yet still, we're all disappointed and surprised yet again by just how pathetic it was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We'll recap it all, and what hope do we have for the Panthers this week, or for maybe the firing of Joe Barry? That's all coming up on this shortened special edition of the Pick Six. And welcome to the Pick Six podcast. I am Brendan Dworzynski, normally over here to your left, my right, whatever side, whatever direction it is. You would be also joined by Jacob Westendorf, but he has abandoned me like a bad parent abandons a child that only wants to be loved and cared for. So Jacob is out today on a serious note. Just yours truly, shortened show today. And boy, howdy, do we have a whole lot to get into, because the Green Bay Packers have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Surprise, what a shock. A defense coordinated by Joe Barry laid an egg in a meaningful game. What a surprise that a defense coordinated by Joe Barry has led to this, has led to where we are now, where it felt like days ago, and certainly a couple weeks ago, it felt like maybe not a foregone conclusion that the Green Bay Packers were going to be a playoff team. But now we, 2 days post-game, and if you're listening to the podcast version of the show, even longer than that beyond the game, still feeling like this is one that got away. Still feeling like this team, this franchise is not going to get over the hump without better coaching, without better direction on the defensive end and in general. And additionally, if Joe Barry is here, Matt LaFleur is never going to be the head coach that we expect him to be, that I think he can be. This team's not ever going to win anything of meaning with a defensive coordinator like that. And the fact that it's been late stage Dom Capers and Mike Pettin and now Joe Barry, and it just continues to get bad. It continues to get worse. We're going to break it all down. We're going to break down the fact that Baker Mayfield had a perfect passer rating on Sunday. Guys, I'm a Baker guy. I love Baker Mayfield. Back in his days at Oklahoma, I have been a fan of his in the NFL when he was with Cleveland. I hoped it was going to work in Carolina. His story with the Rams was fun last year. And I have rooted for Baker every single game this year, save for one, this weekend. I like Baker Mayfield. And he should never put up numbers like he did against Green Bay this weekend. And yes, it's the coordinator. Yes, it's on the players as well. It's just so frustrating. We've got JP already in the comments from Twitter who says, hey, happy for Baker. And also asked, did I see Devondre Campbell's comments on Twitter? We're going to get to that coming up at some point during this next half hour. Because funny enough, I saw a lot of reaction. I guess dive into it right now. And this is the discontent that this franchise has right now. I was going to lead the show telling you like, oh, why isn't Jacob here? Why are we having a special edition show? Jacob's got other obligations. I was busy today. I was calling games for Washburn University basketball in Topeka, Kansas, which, by the way, Washburn University, as some of us know, the alma mater of Corey Ballantyne, Green Bay Packers starting quarterback at times this year. So that's why it's a short show today. That's why I'm a little bit late to get started, not 7 o'clock, 7:30 start time, why there's no Jacob. He's got other obligations. All right, let's dive into the meat. That's the stuff nobody cares about at this point. So the tweet from Devondre Campbell, I think, is interesting, and we'll use that as a jumping off point because I don't think that is end of the world stuff, to be completely honest with you. Players tweet cryptic stuff all the time. And Devondre Campbell, and you are welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, has never exactly been like, let things roll off his back on Twitter guy. Sometimes it has gotten feisty with people, has gotten feisty with fans. And when I first saw that tweet on Tuesday morning, I thought that Devondre Campbell was mad at fans. I thought he had seen the people in my mentions with accounts on Twitter far bigger than mine, people talking on TV, probably some local people in Wisconsin, I would imagine, saying, well, Devondre Campbell's cooked. He's not good anymore. It's time to cut him. I'm sure that was on TV and radio up around Lambeau and maybe within 0.7 miles of Lambeau Field. Certainly saw it all over social media. I thought he was reacting to the fans. I did not even consider the fact that maybe it was actually discontent with the coaching staff, that maybe it was actually discontent with his defensive coordinator. And the funny thing about that really is that the biggest plus for Joe Barry as the Packers defensive coordinator, arguably the biggest plus anyway, if you can think of a better one, let me know. Arguably the biggest plus was the fact that he turned Devondre Campbell in 2021 into an all-pro, first-team all-pro linebacker for the Green Bay Packers. That doesn't compute in any of our heads, certainly not in mine, over the last, decade plus? I mean, it's Super Bowl 45 was our last Packers Super Bowl, right? We're going into 58 this year. That's about when we were talking about great defenses with this franchise. There haven't been many of them ever since. That's how long it has been, okay? So the fact that maybe, possibly, Devondre Campbell is saying, I'm pissed off and I'm worked up and people are mad at me about injuries. I'm going to, give what I get and whatever he said exactly. Maybe the fact that it could have been about the coaching staff, that would be jarring to me, to be completely honest with you. But it's all part of the entire equation, right? These are all individual elements of the entire problem. And JP from Twitter mentions that I thought it was a shot at the office. They asked him to play while he was injured. Fair. That's fair too. That's certainly a way to interpret it. I'm not going to say wrong or right or anything like that, but I think that's entirely fair. And until we hear directly from 59, we're not going to know exactly what he means. And we know players like to troll, right? That players like to do that and like to leave us guessing a little bit, okay? But all of these things together make us, they're all ingredients into this, sorry to be blunt, this shit stew that we are currently left sitting with and eating and ruining our homes every single Sunday. In fact, consider all the factors here, right? Okay, so you've got this Devondre Campbell tweet, which is about something. You've got Quay Walker this week who says, yeah, Joe Barry addressed us, but I'm not going to get into that. If nothing else, that's weird. Like, even if it's totally innocuous, why would you phrase it like that? It's like the Twitter meme, my shirt that says everything is fine is making people question what my shirt already says. Like, if you have to say it's fine, is it really fine? Why would you even say that if you're Quay Walker, if everything is fine? So that's obviously weird. You've got the continued defense of this defense by head coach Matt LaFleur. And like I teased at the top, I like Matt LaFleur. I like him a lot. I think he is a good man. I think he is a good coach. I think he's a very smart offensive mind. And I think for all the talk about he's got to go, if he's going to keep Joe Barry, he sucks, he's bad, they've had all these problems this year. If we don't make the playoffs, you got to throw him out. I don't think, and this is personal belief, and we all get to share our own individual opinions, have our own individual opinions. It is my belief that if you are going to give credit to Jordan Love for becoming what he has become this year, and we love every week on this show, we have a built-in segment every week, the Jordan Love Performance Review. We don't even need to talk about Jordan this week, because at this point, playing a good game, win or lose, that's the expectation for 10. And that's a good thing. That's a positive step in his development. But what I'm getting at is I think if you want to give credit to him for what he has done this year, what he has become, you got to give credit to the head coach, the play caller, the guy who's designing this offense, the guy who's running the show. So I don't think you can just say, well, he sucks, he's terrible, all these things. I don't. But as we've brought up, Jacob and I, on this very show before, I brought it up on my old podcast here on Game On Wisconsin with my pal Matt Freilich, back on the old Final Dump. RIP to the Final Dump. Matt LaFleur has a problem with coordinators. He has got a problem with who he ends up hiring. It ended up working out with Nathaniel Hackett because Hackett is weird and he was on the same wavelength as Aaron Rodgers, and it worked out. And we know Aaron Rodgers was the one who's really coordinating that offense along with Matt LaFleur. It wasn't Nathaniel Hackett. So that in and of itself that's a win, but it's a win because your quarterback was Aaron Rodgers, not because you hired Nathaniel Hackett, who, as we have seen before he came to Green Bay and after he came to Green Bay, has never been good at his job, except when he was in Green Bay and working directly with Aaron Rodgers. That's a problem. We don't know if Adam Stenavich is any good, but as long as LaFleur is coordinating the offense and Stenavich is kind of in the shadows, you're not going to freak out about that. Defensive coordinators, Mike Pettin. You understood why Pettin stuck around because it was a transition and it was a guy who had been a defensive coordinator before, had the experience, understand it. That was never going to work out long-term, unfortunately, even though I was a fan of the move originally. Defense still had the same problems. Joe Barry, disaster nightmare. We're going to get to more on Barry here in a minute because I know there's a lot of bloodlust. If you're listening to this show, if you are watching this show on YouTube Live, Rewind, whatever, there's bloodlust out for Joe Barry. And that is the phrase I have used throughout this season, talking on this show, talking on 580 Sports, talking to Pika when the Packers come up, putting it on Twitter. I've used that phrase because I think so much of it is, this is bad, we have to get rid of him. This thing sucks. It is just so bad. I will do anything to make sure that that guy is out of the building. And I understand it. I do. We're going to get a little bit more into this, but I will just say right up front, I'm not surprised he has not been fired this week. I'm not even remotely surprised that Joe Barry has not been fired this week. But I wanted to finish this point about Matt LaFleur's other coordinators. Look at the special teams. Again, continued systemic problem. Sean Menenga, bad, terrible. Mo Drayton, worse. The assistant for the guy who was already there and terrible was even worse than him. You bring in Rich Bisaccia. Okay, last year was fine. Last year was better than it's been. It was better than Mo Drayton. Year two, with this much continuity on the roster, and I know there's plenty of turnover, but with as much continuity as the Packers have, and with the reputation, the sterling reputation entering his Packers tenure that Rich Bisaccia came in with, this is the most penalized special teams unit in the NFL. That's not okay. That's not acceptable. The special teams still sucks. It has been bad for forever. So look at all of these hires. And again, I want this to work with Matt LaFleur. That's why I put this on Twitter after the game on Sunday. I said, I hope this hurts. And I say that because I like him and I want him to be the coach of this team. And I think he's a good fit for this team. But I hope this loss hurts. I hope it stings. I hope it pains him. I hope he can't sleep because of it, because maybe that is going to bring us to a point where we can make a change. Mo Drayton being quite literally the worst special teams coordinator in the NFL, at least that got him out the paint. And Rich Bisaccia was out there because the Raiders didn't want to hire him as their head coach. And he ends up being the Packers special teams coordinator. If that hadn't been an option, God only knows what that was going to look like. God only knows. And if you want to give, different levels of credit to different guys for different things, that's fine. Our pal Iowa Joe says Bisaccia gets a pass from me for now because of what he's done with Anders Carlson. So be it. My overall point, and I think that's fair to bring up, but my overall point is that it's not like this is the 1992 Green Bay Packers staff, right? Like, I don't see, when I look out on this staff, I don't exactly see Andy Reid and John Gruden and Steve Mariucci and Dick Duran and all these guys who went on to be NFL head coaches to varying levels of success. I know I just mentioned Dick Duran, but that's been a problem for this team. And it's a problem in NFL coaching. It's a problem in football coaching circles in general, that guys are too loyal and their guys are their guys. And if you're the head coach, and I'm not surprised by this from a guy who's from that tree of play callers and the Shanahan tree and kind of the little McVay sapling tree. Like, if you're from that, you stick with guys, you have to be arrogant to get to this point as an NFL coach in general, I think. And if you're someone who is so dedicated to scheme and process and all these things like that whole tree is, I can understand where the loyalty and where the stubbornness comes from. I really do get that. But you have to be flexible. The system works, and you've won a lot of games. You figured out what Jordan Love is. We think we know what Jordan Love is. You found with the front office talented guys. I think this defense has talent on it. Maybe not very deep, but there's talent on it. The system has worked to this point, but you need to be flexible with it. You cannot be so committed to continuity, to keeping the same old still going, to the point where you are actively tanking your team. And I don't mean tanking in the sense that, the suck for luck, the tank for Tua, go get Victor Wembanyama kind of tanking. I just mean that there is a ceiling on this team. Seriously, ask yourself, ask Packers fans, friends that you know, do you think, as currently constructed, even if with a good offseason, let's say the Packers go out and draft a starting caliber safety and add some depth to the defense, have a good offseason in terms of personnel additions, make the right subtractions, make all the money work. Let's hypothetically say that. Can you honestly, earnestly say that the Green Bay Packers can win a Super Bowl with its current coaching staff, specifically looking at head coach and coordinators? Because if you can say yes to that, then you are far more optimistic about Joe Barry and where this defense is going than I am. Much, much, much more optimistic about that. And hey, I love optimism. I try to be optimistic. I hate being this negative. This sucks. This is paining me deep in my chest. It is paining me to talk so negatively about this Packers team and talk about how many things are going wrong right now and how much things suck right now, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. But what from recent Packers history and what from Joe Barry's history, and frankly, from Matt LaFleur's coordinator hiring history, leads you to believe that? He's just not good enough. We've got True North in here, P1 here on the Pick Six from YouTube. And he says, as a hockey fan, I've seen many teams quit on a coach, and the only solution is to get a new coach. And that brings me back to the bloodlust I was talking about. And True North, I appreciate that because I did want to get to this point. We have been hearing, let's lay this out first. Okay, here is the baseline for this topic. Joe Barry should have never been hired in the first place because he's always been bad at his job and has failed everywhere he's been. You should never get a second chance at coordinator, especially certainly a third chance after you coordinated a defense for a winless team. That should be it. Like that's it. You're done. You're toast. You're cooked. You can go coach high school somewhere. You can probably go get an analyst job working for Nick Saban or Kirby Smart at their school for coaches who don't coach very good but want to do other things good. Like that's where you should end up if you're a coach on a team like that. Okay. He never should have been hired. Should have been fired after year one. Certainly should have been fired after year two. Okay, that's the baseline. Those are the facts that we can all agree with, right? I have been in the camp this year after the season started, and especially as we got deeper and deeper into the year, and I know Jacob Westendorf agreed with me on this. You don't fire him at this point because who are you replacing him with? And the logic is, okay, well, you throw this coach in, or, oh God, Jerry Montgomery is going to be your interim defensive coordinator, or whatever it ends up being. It's not actually going to get schematically better in all likelihood because these are Joe Barry's guys. It's the same system in place. It's the same people, the same personnel, the same culture, all the things like that. I personally don't think that would have changed a whole lot going into these last couple of weeks. And that's just what I believe. And I know many of us probably feel differently about that. And again, that's where that bloodlust phrase comes from. And especially, and I hate to be all internet meta here with you, but in the era of social media fandom and social media interaction, when it is so easy to throw out opinion here, opinion there, opinion here, hot take, I do it. If you follow me on Twitter, you have seen every single Packers game. I am so emotional. It is absolutely embarrassing. That's why I don't watch games with anyone except my wife, because anyone who saw me would say, wow, you are unhinged. Not okay. So I get that kind of thing. I really do. I don't feel that way about this, but I understand it. This is the kind of problem that isn't going to be fixed right away. But I do think I am swinging back in the other direction after having that take. And I'm not embarrassed for having that take for a long time. But that is such a horrific loss to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's not awful. And that's the thing about it. Tampa Bay is not an awful team. I think they're a playoff team. I've been kind of riding the Tampa Bay bandwagon, I guess. I'm not thinking they're going to be a Super Bowl contender this year. I just don't think they are. I think Todd Bowles is a terrible coach. Okay, that's the first starting point there. And as much as I like Baker, like I talked about at the top of the show, I don't know that Baker Mayfield, even with weapons like Godwin and Evans and that offensive line, still some good pieces defensively, I don't think that's a Super Bowl contending team. But they're a playoff team, I think. I think they're good enough to get there. So to play a game that's at least somewhat competitive against a team with that kind of quality and to still come away from it thinking this was absolute garbage, this was embarrassing, this was awful, this was miserable, that tells you how bad this was. And I do think I am getting to a point, and True North says the Giants are also not an awful team. I think the Buccaneers are better than the Giants. That's a comment in from the YouTube feed. I think the Bucs are a better team than the Giants. The Giants have a good coach, and I think Brian Dable has done a good job of finding a way to put up points and find ways to win, even with Tommy DeVito at quarterback, though they laid an egg this weekend against the Saints. But to come away from it and say you had a chance, Jordan Love and the offense did enough. That Giants game, look, it sucked. The Packers should have won. The offense wasn't good enough either. Packers got lucky. Saquon Barkley had the dumbest fumble of the year in the NFL. Okay, you flush it, you move on. You had so much riding on this Buccaneers game. And you're going up against a quarterback in Baker Mayfield who, as they laid out on the broadcast, I believe, and I know it was talked about on ESPN and on NBC and everywhere else following that game on Sunday, Baker's been bad in Green Bay in the last couple of years. With Cleveland, we remember Christmas Day a couple of years ago. He was terrible. Packers didn't as much win that game on Christmas Day as Baker Mayfield and the Browns lost that game because they were just dreadful in that contest, right? Last year with the Rams, it was a good Packers win. It was a very good Packers win. And he did not look especially good when he came to Lambeau with the Rams. And he just shredded this defense. And dudes were open all game long. It's not like he was dropping back and he was throwing, we're talking 2018, first time we ever saw Patrick Mahomes in the NFL plays, where he's scrambling all around. He's running sideline to sideline. no look behind the head, on a dime in a tight window. That's not what he was doing in this game. Mike Evans was wide open. Chris Godwin just wide open. Rashad White, dude, a running back. And I know Rashad White's a good pass catcher, but come on. Come on. You cannot live with that. You can't. And that is why going into this week against the Carolina Panthers, I'm not surprised that Joe Barry did not get fired for all the reasons I talked about. It's the arrogance that comes with being an NFL head coach. I think it's the built-in arrogance of Matt LaFleur, and that can be a good thing. That's not exclusively a bad thing when it comes to NFL head coaching and when it comes to Matt LaFleur. I think arrogance in some ways is a positive. But when you factor in his arrogance, when you factor in the arrogance of being an NFL head coach, when you factor in the fact that the Packers, next to maybe the Steelers, if anyone else, are willing to give people time. The Steelers are in a class of their own with their head coaches, but the Packers are willing to give time. They're willing to work things out. We've seen that with players. I was just mentioning that kicker-wise this weekend, watching the game. Hey, even if Anders Carlson has struggled up and down this season, the Packers are the one team in the league that is going to stick with him through at least one full season of him working through those kinks, because that's what the Packers do. Look at, I think it was 2012, 2013, Mason Crosby. We all remember the year. He was awful. He was terrible. He's one of the all-time Packer greats, best kicker in Packer history. I'm sorry to the Ryan Longwell stands out there. But the Packers are willing to let people work through things. The Packers aren't. Remember how big of a deal it was? Let's use a more modern example, right? Remember when Mike McCarthy got fired mid-season? It felt like the world was ending. The Packers fired a coach mid-season. Mike McCarthy, a Super Bowl winner? I know this is not apples to apples, okay? It's at least not red apples to red apples, maybe red to green. But if you can fire Mike McCarthy, who, for all of his foibles, and I do think he has plenty as a head coach, if you can fire a dude who won a Super Bowl and won a ton of games for your franchise mid-season, even with the drama with the quarterback at the time, even though that team was clearly going upstream without a paddle, if you can fire that guy, you can get rid of your current defensive coordinator. You can. And it's the fact that Matt LaFleur has stuck by him so vigilantly, so aggressively, that worries me. I do believe, and maybe you'll call me naive for feeling this way, I do believe that Joe Barry is getting fired at the end of the year. I think the comments from Matt LaFleur this week indicated that he knows time is ticking on his choice and that he knows time is up for Joe Barry. And maybe it ends up being the mutual parting of ways, or it's just simply, well, we did not extend his contract and, we wish him the best of luck. He's a Packer forever. The nonsense you get from NFL teams so all the time. I do think he is going to be gone. I also believe, and I think it was Tyler Herrick on Twitter who pointed this out, that Matt LaFleur said, whatever the quote was exactly, I don't have the words in front of me, the transcription in front of me, but, as of today, I expect him to be the play caller. He's the play caller for the defense today as it stands, et cetera, et cetera. That to me, and I've learned this for, you listen to press conferences long enough, the college basketball team I cover, the Kansas Jayhawks, the KU football helmet back there, Bill Self, and whatever you say about him, when you go to a press conference of his, when you listen to a press conference of his, every single thing he says has a message. And you learn over time, what do these certain things mean? And you pick up on little hints about what could be coming in a future game, what you could be looking for in recruiting, in the transfer portal, things like that. Matt LaFleur being very specific in saying, as of today, I think it is possible, maybe not likely, I think it's possible, if the Packers come out against Carolina, weekend of Christmas, you're with your family, you're spending time with your loved ones, you are hoping, let's just have an easy game, let's just enjoy the football game, win or loss, it's the best time of the year, it's the holidays. And the Packers go out and get embarrassed by Bryce Young. I like Bryce Young. You have found out, if you didn't already know this about me over the course of this edition of the Pick Six, I am definitely a quarterback apologist. I'm willing to give many quarterbacks a very, very long leash, okay? I like Bryce Young. I think he's going to be a good NFL player someday. That Carolina team is hot trash. They are awful. And I know they beat Atlanta. Guess what? Atlanta also sucks. And I know the Packers lost to them. Falcons fans, if you find this, say, oh, we beat you. No, congrats. Apparently we're not very good either. The Packers aren't very good either. All right, pal? The Falcons team stinks. Desmond Ridder is just an embarrassment to the quarterback position. There you go. There's a mean word about a quarterback. I know Carolina beat them. They didn't exactly look impressive. Our pal Joe says, Bryce Young hasn't thrown a touchdown in a month, so of course he'll go for 6 this weekend. If we do end up seeing a performance like that, I do think Joe Barry has a very good chance of being canned because you got the very clear today is my view is he's still the play caller. Or as of today, that's what it looks like. Again, whatever the words from Matt LaFleur were in particular. I think it's possible. And I do think he's gone at the end of the season. But I think it is also worth saying messaging is important. And to go back to the point earlier about the Devondre Campbell tweet or Quay Walker being weird and cagey about whatever Joe Barry said to the team following the game on Sunday, I think it is worth at least approaching the idea of sending a message. We are committed to making this better. We are committed to this team being a Super Bowl contender. Our defense is not good enough. Matt LaFleur should at least be able to go in front of his team and say, guys, or Brian Gutekunst, or whoever you want to take the fall for this, and say, guys, we like Joe. We appreciate what Joe did for us. I know some of you really care about Joe Barry, but our defense is not good enough. We are title town for a reason. We are not happy to be here town. We are not, maybe we'd win the division because our offense is just incredible, but the defense is eventually going to let us down town. No, we're title town. We need to expect better. That's what I was saying on the show a couple weeks ago, talking about the coordinator problems and the special teams problems specifically, that just being better than before, well, when before is toxic waste dump levels of terrible, that's not good enough. This is a franchise that should expect and want to win Super Bowls. So I would say if I was in that position, and for many reasons, thank God I'm not, but it's at least worth sending a message that, look, we're committed to being better. We are committed to this defense getting better, to being a better team, to being a better franchise. We've got our quarterback. Look over there. You see that guy, number 10, tall guy, first year as a starter. He's proven he's the guy. We've got a wide receiver room that looks awesome. We just inked our star edge rusher to a big time deal because we want him to be around because we think we can build around that guy. Kenny Clark is still 16 years old and he's playing like this. He's had this resurgent year. We've got dudes. We think we have the coach. We think we have the front office. What is keeping us from being there? It's an embarrassing defense, guys. More than anything, special teams is bad. Offense has been up and down, things you can understand. And I know Jacob has said throughout the year when we've done the show together that you can't grade on a curve this year because Jordan Love's been around and you got to win. And I understand that. I'm a little more flexible and willing to grade on a curve. And I knew there'd be growing pains with this offense this year. Okay. So I knew that was coming. We can get there with what we have and the structure we have in place, but there is a major roadblock. I think it is at least broaching the idea of fire. If he's got to be the scapegoat, pay his buyout, whatever, move on from him just to prove to your guys and to your fans. I know the players matter more, but realistically, prove that we're committed to being a better franchise. We are committed to being a better team and being a Super Bowl contender going forward. I think you move on from your defensive coordinator, especially now, especially going into week 16 of 18. You can live with that. I certainly wish the Packers would live with that. As for this game, and I said earlier that I think if Joe Barry ends up having his defense just hit a brick again against Carolina, yeah, I imagine there's a good chance he's going to end up getting fired. That being said, I think this Packers defense, and famous last words, man, famous last words, and you can hold me to this. Grab the screen recorder app, save this, transcribe it, whatever. I understand these are famous last words. I think Carolina might even be Packer defense proof. I do. They are just so dreadful. Their offense is a mess. Again, I like Bryce Young, but he has just been beaten to a pulp this year. That offensive line is a sieve. Their defense is okay, but it's got some issues too. I think the Packers are going to win this game. I think the Packers are going to cover the spread. It's on the screen right now. It's 4.5 if you're listening to the podcast version or it's on in a background tab or whatever. It's 4.5. I'm going to take the Packers to win this one. Give me Packers 24. 20-10. Maybe Packers 20-10. I'll be a little less optimistic. I think it's doable for the Packers. I wish we didn't have to be so negative, guys. I hate it. It makes me so sad that I had to be so negative about this team. We would love for you to check out the podcast. Of course, if you want to go back and listen to any of this, check it out on the Game on Wisconsin YouTube. You can follow yours truly on Twitter at BrendanDZW. I've got to get out of here because the freezer is about to jump in. I know Sanjay is chomping at the bit to get in here. We will talk to you guys coming up next week again, right back here on the Pick Six. Thanks for joining us for the special edition of the show. Jacob's back next week. I'm back too. We'll talk to you then. This has been a Joe Barry is terrible edition of the Pick Six.